Welcome back. Today we have a pretty handy word, an explorer, some very early technology, a space announcement, some aeronautical terms, a song and a quote. So grab your favorite cuppa, settle in, and let's check it out. Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for April 9th. April 9th is the 99th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, 100th in leap years, with 266 days remaining to the end of the year. Today's word is Dumaflache. Merriam-Webster didn't have Dumaflache, even in the unabridged dictionary, but it's a word I've certainly heard all my life, so I knew it had to be out there somewhere. I asked Google. Dumaflache does appear in the Urban Dictionary, and what an interesting neighborhood Urban Dictionary is. There's also a Reddit thread about the word Dumaflache and its potential sources. Back to our word, though, Dumaflache is a noun that one might use to call a thing whose name you can't quite remember. A gadget, an object, or contraption with an unknown or forgotten name. I've always heard it referring to objects like a thingamajig, a whatchamacallit, a doohickey, thingamabob, gizmo, or widget. Things like that. Example sentences might include, "Hand me that Dumaflache off the table there, would you?" Or, "I bought a Dumaflache to help open jars, but I forgot what it's called." Or, "That drawer is full of wires and Dumaflaches from old electronics." And apparently, some folks also use Dumaflache to refer to a person whose name they don't recall or don't know, as in, "I was talking to that girl the other day, Dumaflache with the red hair," or, "Who were those Dumaflaches we ran into last week? I can't remember their names." Dumaflache most likely comes from the late 1800s to the early 1900s and is one of many playful placeholder words people have invented when they couldn't recall an item's name. Dumaflache. Today's word Dumaflache was requested by Odyssey viewer at Easy9. Thanks, Easy9. And if you have a word you'd like us to explore in this Word of the Day segment, drop it in the comments and we'll get it on the list. And with that, French explorer and fur trader René-Robert Cavelier, Sieur de la Salle, had been exploring the Great Lakes region of the United States and Canada. He's best known for an early 1682 expedition in which he canoed the lower Mississippi River from the mouth of the Illinois River to the Gulf of Mexico. And on April 9, 1682, upon discovering the mouth of the Mississippi River, he claimed it for France and named it La Louisiane in honor of St. Louis and Louis XIV. We know it today as Louisiana. Beginning in the 1760s, humanity began to undergo a phenomenon we have come to know as the Industrial Revolution, or the First Industrial Revolution, because there was more after that. During this time, all sorts of people were making machines that could do all sorts of things, some of which were unimaginable before. For example, capturing sound on recording medium, a fascinating field of endeavor. Many pioneering attempts to record and reproduce sound were made during the latter half of the 1800s, not least of which the efforts of Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. He built a device called a phonoautograph in 1857, which would then go on to culminate in the invention of the phonograph by Thomas Edison in 1877. But today we're talking about de Martinville's phonoautograph, and it is that on April 9th, 1860, he made the first known recording of a human voice. It's not very clear, but it was the first one, so we'll give it some grace. I've included a link in the description to that recording if you'd like to listen to it. On April 9th, 1959, NASA announced the selection of the United States' first 7 astronauts, whom the news media quickly dubbed the Mercury 7. Those 7 were Alan Shepard, Gus Grissom, Gordon Cooper, Wally Schirra, Deke Slayton, John Glenn, and Scott Carpenter. In other flight news, the first Boeing 737, a 100 series, made its maiden flight on April 9, 1967. And on April 9, 1969, the first British-built Concorde 002 made its maiden flight. The Concorde was a supersonic airliner designed to transport passengers at speeds greater than the speed of sound in terms of airspeed. Concorde was a French-British joint development, and the very first Concorde flight was in March of 1969, but today's event was the first British-built Concorde. Concorde flew for about 34 years, being retired in the fall of 2003. One of the key things that persistently appeared as I looked into the word Dumaflache was a song called Dumaflache by American country music singer Daryl Singletary. So, today's song is Dumaflache by Daryl Singletary. Written by Billy Lawson, Dumaflache appears on a compilation album by Daryl Singletary, Now and Again, released in the year 2000. Best I can tell, that will have been the 4th of 10 albums that he released. It doesn't appear that Dumaflache was ever released as a single. I think it should have been, but it's a catchy little tune about a guy who'd sworn off romance until a certain young lady caught his eye. It's also been covered by David Lewis. Dumaflache by Daryl Singletary. Link in the description. How about that? What an interesting day today turned out to be. And for today's quote, we have an impromptu poem instead of an actual quote. So here it is. I reached in the drawer for a thingamajig, but grabbed a whatchamacallit, slightly too big. The doohickey slipped and fell with a clack, knocking a doodad clear off the rack. I searched for the gadget I'd had just before, but Dumaflache spilled all over the floor. With widgets and gizmos now under my shoe, I wondered, what was I fixing? I hadn't a clue. So I gathered my gadgets, both large and small, and tossed them back neatly. Well, mostly, that's all. For someday I'll need them, of that I'm quite sure, though what they all do remains obscure. Alrighty, y'all take care. Be good to each other. I'll see you next time. And on April 9th, not right now. We'll read that again. And a hearty and grateful shout out to these lovely folks who've bought me a coffee. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to add your name to that list, there is a link in the description where you too can buy me a coffee. All righty.